Well, hi. Hi, everyone. It's been a while since we've all had a chance to get together. Number 15 of these sessions. So that means our 15th book. And we're thrilled to be together talking about women in leadership and really the real lives, real lessons that this book delivers and insights. So maybe first, as we always do, a quick introduction. And there have been some shifts and changes perhaps along the road. So maybe Rania want to start us off with what's new and shaking in your world.
Yep, Rania Sawalhi, PhD Education Leadership. Recently moved back to Jordan. Previous recordings, previous meetings, I always would keep introducing, telling that I'm in Qatar, but today I'm saying I'm in Jordan. And welcome you all to come and visit. So we might have an in-person gathering going around one of the wonders of the world, Petra. Wearing different hats, having lots of things working at the University of Jordan, and having a nonprofit organization, Edu Enterprise, with trying to bridge the gap between what they call practitioners and academia, which we all try to work and move between developing and improving education opportunities for everyone. And many things we might be discussing and surprised to within this discussion. And pleased to be with this amazing reading group, our 15th discussion.
Amazing. I know it's amazing. 15. Holy cow. Hey, Andrea, how about you?
Thank, thanks, Trista. Andrea, I'm in Sydney. I am executive director at ICSE, which is how I met these amazing people. I also working with one of the universities here, UTS, and doing some research to support early career teachers in rural and remote areas. So we're looking at how we can support them through coaching. So I've trained some leaders in that field, and now they're going to be working with early career teachers, and then we'll be sharing that research, hopefully very soon. And then I'm also working as contextual coaching, where I work with leaders and teachers in schools to support their professional growth. So that's keeping me busy, and I'm loving it.
I love that. And I love that you're, really working to figure out how to support those early career teachers. As you know, that's a shared passion of ours and doing that work. So that sounds amazing. I'm Trista Hollick, and I am today in Ottawa, Ontario, in my house. Uh, and thrilled to be here. Also, lots of different roles. Most currently, I'm working at the University of Ottawa teaching a course on coaching and mentoring in professional contexts, which I just adore. So I'm happy to be doing that again. And also working on a research project that is looking at professional learning in the global south and thinking about what does that look like in rural communities of Sierra Leone. And I have the opportunity to work with some amazing academics from Sierra Leone, and we're doing some work listening and learning with and from the teachers working there to see how do we support like same issues, early career, but also retention. So it's very exciting. And definitely from gender and inclusion perspective and thinking about that impacts within that context. Okay, you're back, Rania. I see you popping in and out. We're good, right?
Yep, all good.
And can I
Awesome.
just tie
Okay.
a link with all of us? We care so much about mentoring and supporting and the professional growth of others. What the research I did finished up 2 years ago now, I keep coming back to it, the importance or the catalyst of the leadership team or the principal within the school, or how that their leadership can really support programs and initiatives to support the early career teachers, but also the middle leaders who also want to have growth and maybe aspire to leadership. So I think that ties in with our topic tonight about leadership.
I agree totally. And thinking about, I think women in these leadership roles, because all of us, that is, I think what drew us initially, that we are within leadership roles, we're interested in our leadership roles, and we're interested in the role the gender plays. And so those of you that are watching this after the fact, please do add yourself to our little world capture, see where you are in these conversations, see what's maybe we can connect in some way. In Jordan, that sounds amazing. I love that, Rania. Thanks for offering to host us.
I
We
think,
just have to get there.
and then we might be adding, updating the map after the changes. It seems like we need to also to update with our previous attendees.
Let's do it.
Yes, but
So, what we're really this book has been sitting on a few of our bookshelves for a while, and it's one that's really intriguing. It's not, although we are mainly interested in the field of education, we have been looking at women in leadership in a variety of different spaces. And the reason why this book really spoke to us was it gives the perspective of women who've been in the political sphere. So it was an interesting experience to see their concept of what it means to be women in leadership. And it seems like in a really fraught space, is what, as I was reading, definitely see the complexity of working in that space. And what I also love is that the two authors, and also if you can see on the cover, there are a number of some familiar names, maybe less familiar names that we see, but they are across the world. So it's an international perspective, which is what we try to do here in our well-read group, bring in the different perspectives from different continents, actually. Um, yeah, I think,
and I
anyone
think
have
it's
anything to say
really,
about
yeah,
content?
and I think it's really interesting, Andrea, of how they how they had mentioned education and the opportunities
Mm,
that had led through their journey. And the way that they ended the book, also talking about education and the opportunities having a child coming to this world, it's an opportunity of how are we going to shape it or think about it. So it might not seem that it's connected directly to education leadership in that sense. But the other point also I would like to highlight is education is kind of shaping many things that around us. So we can't say that education is not part of politics or is not part of that sector because it's interrelated, and it's the profession that teach all other professions. Especially when the chapters they mentioned about their journey, the process that they had been through, and even the small activities that they had participated in during school that led them also to be voicing their experiences. And they had never thought that this small activity that they were participating in of how it shaped their future and give them courage and gave them the power also to continue that path. So that's something also we might be re-envisioning or revisiting the student activities, the student leadership in our schools, and what kind of things that they might be interested in having or exploring. So we have
Yeah.
eight lives, eight stories, eight ladies mentioning about their work. And I will be also referring to the methodology and the way that they had written the book. It's really interesting of referring and going backwards, forwards with let's say part of the stories of how they shaped and how they had developed the structure of this book. Thank you, Andrea, for working on summarizing kind of a semi of who are those ladies' lives, their role, and their countries. So we're having this holistic approach of how they had traveled all around the world.
yeah, and I just wanted to build on that too and think about the politics influences education extremely. So, and thinking about also one thing that stood out to me is the agendas that some of these leaders brought forward had to do with education or girls in schools, depending on where they were situated, and motherhood, and those key elements that definitely are related to gender. And it was interesting to see that if you have positions of leadership and political leadership, that those agendas may become a little bit more to the fore as we're talking about it. So I thought that was an interesting, it's also education depends heavily on the political system. Andrea, what did you think when you were looking
You
at
know,
this
when I
section?
read this, I was sort of looking at each person, but then there was the conversations between them all. because I remember Jacinda was saying, well, my experience was unlike so-and-so's, because they weren't just telling their own story, but it was more like a dialogue between them through the writing, which I thought was really nice. They actually spoke of each other's experiences and how they were different. And I thought that provided a different way to read the book. I thought that was good.
Do you think this book could have been written by someone who wasn't in the political space, or do you think the fact that the authors themselves had credibility in that space worked to create that dialogue?
Well, I've actually heard Julia Gillard speak, and I was amazed at her presentation skills and her speaking. It was to a whole lot of educators, so that made a really big impression. So that's why I was keen to read the book. Yes, Prime Minister, but when you have that connection with somebody via a presentation, it just makes it a little bit different. So I felt like while I connected with the book and I know of Julia Gillard's history, it gave me a better sense of the book, if you know what I mean. But I'm wondering from you two, did you know much about the authors prior?
No.
No, for me, this was the first time to read or to hear about their work, their contribution. It's interesting because I think the way that they had been involved and they had those several meetings and several opportunities to be engaged at different levels with those ladies or about their world, that would give them a better sense of how to write and how to express that. And this is something that they have themselves had tried to mention within the first chapter when they discuss about their journey and what influenced them and what enlightened this book. I also found it kind of encouraging, inspiring also for us to see we might be interested in doing something similar. The way that they start describing how they traveled and where's the space of the interview also would give us a better sense of reading the room in a way. And while they were writing the book, they will say your authors, or maybe you want to do like your authors, like they have this kind of engagement way of reflecting and thinking about what they are contributing. But if you want to add something in specific, Andrea, about the authors before we continue and proceed with the books and the hypothesis.
No, I think I've pretty much shared it. Yeah, I just thought it was a different way in which I've read this sort of story. I think it was a narrative of their own journeys, but then they were comparing them with other people because they met along the way through this process. And I know when it came to political things, I didn't connect as much as that with that topic, but I could see there was threads woven through that I could easily see that would work in education and the leadership in education. So yeah.
Interesting. So we have 8, as they describe it, we have 8 lives and 8 hypotheses.
Yeah, and I like how the topics of their hypotheses are really drawn from the stories. Right. So when I first saw the name of the hypotheses, I was thinking, but then when they unpack when they unpack like what it means to be, it's all about the hair, and to think about, what people focus in on for some women leaders, and what their hair looks like becomes the focus. It really does start making sense, and I like how they take sort of a very simple concept and then build on it, and to develop some questions. And then also that it comes to their lessons as well. So they provide the hypotheses, but they also provide some lessons for us to think about, if we want to encourage. And ultimately, I think they want to encourage to have more women to enter politics, but they also talk about be aware, not beware.
Yeah.
So that one of the quotes that really stood out to me at the end is that there are some really difficult stories that we're hearing, and it would almost turn you off wanting to apply for politics and reading some of these hypotheses and the lessons. But then, I think that they're saying they just want you to be aware when you come in, but not to not enter. That makes
Can
sense.
I piggyback on that, Trista? Sorry, Rania.
No, go ahead, Andrea.
I was just going to say, same with principalship, right? When you hear really bad stories about what people experience as a principal in a school, if it's painted such a terrible picture, no one will put their hand up to be principals. And I think that's something we're dealing with at the moment, is not only the shortage of teachers, but shortage of leaders and principals, and caring about their well-being as well. But I think that's what they were sort of saying. If you say too much about the negative, you might actually turn people off the whole process of entering politics. And I did contact a friend of mine who just finished a course called Pathways to Politics for Women, which is a program that's been in Australia now for 10 years on how to support women and educate them to take that path into politics. And I thought that was really interesting. I actually asked her to be here tonight, but she was a bit busy. But she said she loved the book and she loved doing the program. So it was a very positive approach of trying to get more women into politics.
And just completing and building on what you had mentioned, Andrea, and connecting it to schools and kind of education leadership. And when I was interviewing teachers for my PhD, most of them were referring for teacher leaders, and they said that we want to see their facial expressions or their body language, and in specific, their face as something friendly or welcoming, or like the appearance of them. So that made me kind of dig deeper, and I kept asking them, do you mean something in specific about their facial expressions? No, but they need to be friendly, or they're looking their appearance. They need to indicate 1, 2, 3. And when I started to dig and see the previous studies, what they have mentioned, I found a study about the US presidents and how the media will take care of their appearance, and like the angle of the photo and the coverage. And when I was reading this chapter, I was, wow, like it elaborated more and it gave more kind of details about the concept. But then if you would discuss this book, or even if you want to connect it with the education leader aspect of how to make it more friendly and how to take care of all these details, either for you and your colleagues, or for you as an educator and for your students, maybe, or the stakeholders, so that they will be accepting and respecting and talking about this, because at the end, you're not only between the walls of the school, but you're also taking it further for the community. So it's kind of a semi-politics, political aspect that we're dealing here, but we don't usually discuss those issues within our courses or within the leadership preparation programs, or with any kind of support or training. I know in some countries, Arab countries, the teachers would take off their scarf when they enter the school, because there is no men in that room. So they will take care of their appearance, like they wear pretty clothes, and like as if that they're going to a female community, so that they will have this friendly environment. And they will be sharing tips about what to select, what clothes to be selected, like what's the most practical, those kind of things. But no one will actually help us within the preparation, or how would that affect or influence the practices themselves, if that would make sense. On the other hand, being covered Muslim women, like sometimes some people would judge you even before coming and discussing this with you, like, no, we don't want to go and discuss 1, 2, 3 with her, or maybe she would present some specific ideas or topics without even having a friendly conversation, or trying, to come. I wouldn't say that it's kind of a barrier, as much as it's an opportunity to discuss and to see how we can communicate differently, and what would make it more friendly for them to understand, or to open, at least to be open to talk, to discuss, and to explore. And then I would respect, like what they're discussing, what they're thinking. But I found each one of those chapters is, could be connected in a way to our own work with mentoring or discussing, especially for the last one. I think also Triste will be reflecting on the book that we had written on women education, or women education, leadership, and community, where we had self-empowerment, and then we had sharing stories, role modeling. So that always comes to us with every single aspect about how to share, what to share, and how to help others also to either a mentor-mentee relationship or beyond that even.
Yeah, definitely the importance of women supporting other women was really emphasized. Along with that, the male allies as well, right? Having that other support as well. But I want to ask you guys a question, just to because they talked about the personal leadership journeys. Can you share a moment that shaped your leadership journey or challenged your sense of self as a leader?
Um, that's related to gender, Andrea, or
Just in general, what was there something that really shaped your leadership journey or challenged your sense of self as a leader? Is there a point where you felt like
yeah,
you were really challenged?
like I can think of one. I'm sure there are many that because it all
Mm-hmm.
formed over time. But very early on, when I took up a vice principalship of it was a secondary school and a junior school coming together, so it's taking into a new VP role, and it was the first staff meeting, and so I hadn't met. So let's say just over 80 staff members, and I hadn't really met the staff members of the secondary school, and previously I was a teacher at the middle school, so I knew some of those colleagues. And I was a vice principal, and so the principal, there was a long-standing teacher, had like long history in the community, male, a previous football player, well respected, well loved, like a sizable, like tall man. And I just remember in the meeting, I was being introduced and we're talking about, the key topics. It wasn't a big meeting, but after one of the male department heads said, "You'll just have to earn my respect. I don't just give it to you automatically." That was my first introduction. And I kept wondering, would that same statement been made to the principal after? Like, and like, oh, thank you. Welcome to the school. Really great to be here. And I'm like, well, clearly I haven't won it yet. And then I had to wonder, what does it actually mean to win someone's respect or earn their respect? And so that was, yeah, so that shaped leadership right off the bat because I'm thinking like this is gonna be a tough go, and uh,
Yeah,
and and so that was yeah. So what does that mean, and who talks to whom, and how do I respond, and then what actions and integrity do I live with that help
yeah.
earn the respect for myself, but for them as well. Anyway, so
That's what about you, Rania? Did something in your
Mm,
experience shape your
Many,
leadership?
many
Or
stories, but one of them would be the first time when I became vice principal, and I was 28 years ago, like centuries ago, ages ago. And everyone was considering me like very young, too young to be
mm,
part of this role or to be to earn maybe their I wouldn't say respect, but at least trustworthiness or knowledge. Like you're capable of doing this job. Um, and that taught me that I will not share my age again. Not because I don't like it, but even we have a saying in Arabic that if you tell them your age and you're young, they will underestimate your experience. If you tell them your age and you're old or aged, they will consider that you're too old for this and, like you might not be capable. So that would give me a space of going beyond that. And I said, I will just leave it to you. Let's just focus on the capabilities and what we're doing and see then if we're able to achieve this one, two, three. The other aspect is so continuously I will be reflecting, especially when we're talking about intergenerations and Gen Z or Gen Alpha or whatever. So that would make me smile with their comments and their expectations, like, do you know this? Do you really have this in your age? In that era, did you do one, two, three? Like always continuously those kind of questions. And yeah, we used to do this. We know this. We're able to, achieve one, two, three. Um, Another aspect about when I had my first child, so everyone would keep telling me, you will not be able to combine both, kind of leadership and motherhood. You need to leave one of the roles and focus on the other one. But I would always see my mom as as a big influencer in this, like why you can't combine both. And who told you that you should judge me and tell me, like what I'm capable of doing and how to do it? And that also will take us to the page 112 when they had list of questions for each woman leader. Did you ever dream about being a leader as a child? Can you talk to us about the key people who influenced your views, or can you prop specifically around the influence of your father and mother? And I think that's really interesting because sometimes we envision, but we don't stop and think about visioning ourselves as leaders or seeing ourselves how we're acting in this role. So many examples, Andrea. Thank you for asking that, but I'm not so sure about the example that you would share with us.
Yeah, we'd like to know your what's your answer for
I think I've probably shared this one before, but it's like a mixture of both of yours. When I was trying to get a scholarship for doing my doctorate, and I was told I have a husband and 3 children to look after, and I probably should be focusing on that area. Maybe I should go and do my master's first, which I'd already done. So it was just one of those. I felt like I was put in my place, and I just thought, wow, I'd never experienced that before. So before I could speak up, I had to just stop and process what had just happened. And I didn't like that feeling that I was in a place where I hadn't experienced before. Today, I would probably answer, well, I'd answer more than just being quiet, passively accepting that. I mean, I didn't passively accept it. I just went off and did my own path. But I just thought, if that was another person, maybe younger or didn't have a very supportive husband, right? My husband's always been the person who supported me the most in my education, because I didn't go to university until the age of 30. So he was the one who said, yes, you can do it. I would never have done it without his support. So yes, I love having the women support throughout my life, and I could name the women who've supported me the most. But I also have seen a positive male figure in my life, and then I've seen the detrimental effect a few words from another male can do to your career or even your sense of worth, sense of self.
So you
Yeah.
just reminded me. Go ahead, Trista.
I was just going to say that reminded me of Jacinda Ardern talking about in the book. Were you going to say this too, Rania? About, how she was going to call out, she would, if she could go back, she would call out sexism a lot more early. And I was thinking a lot about her in this book because she had a child while being a leader, and that brought up so much conversation in other countries and people who aren't even connected to her work. There's all sorts of opinions about whether that was, appropriate. Actually, I'm really interested to see her new documentary. And she has a book
Yeah.
out too as well. And just to see, because that really, I was also young, Rania, when I took on that first role, and I think age was part of it as well. And just, it's sort of like, yeah, I don't know if it was a different time. I wonder if I would respond in a different way. But I also ended up having children during that time as well. And I felt a sense of guilt around, choosing a different path in the middle of my career. And so I really resonated when the book started talking about motherhood and trying to manage these different spaces and the different messages you get. Go ahead, Rania, I cut you off.
No, the example I'm sharing is a little bit kind of funny, and it's interesting because I was 9 years old when my father asked me to translate something to English in front of our neighbor who used to work in the American embassy. And the room was full of men, and it was a really tough question. Till now, I don't think I even know the translation of the word because it was kind of combination of an Islamic Arabic term, and he was, kind of jurisprudence and something with the law. And in the middle of that room, but my father did not hesitate to ask a 9 years old to come in front of all these men and try to translate and to express the meaning to everyone. Until now, like I have this, he trusted me and he knew that I will be able to express and make sure that at least they will understand something very close to the concept, although it might be kind of something it's law based or it's a political based or something that I might not be aware of at that age. But this is of how we reflect back and think about the influence of our parents and what kind of opportunities we had been involved in that might shape our future or help us to see and accept the new roles or the new opportunities that we will be facing. So it might be an interesting or a small question that you might ask a child, but that would help them in every single step that they will be moving forward and developing within their careers.
Yeah. And it's interesting that Theresa May and Julia Gillard both didn't have children, right? So then they're judged on not having children. And so are the other people for having children and whether they have young children. It's just an interesting space that, there's judgment within, I think. Would they judge a male the same? That was the question that kept coming up with those.
And I
And I
also think
also like, go ahead, Trista.
we're in the same space today. I think the judgment is there. That's the takeaway. Like there's going to be judgment, and there's going to be judgment in every possible way, and you really can't win if you're trying to navigate the judgment. That's the message I took away from the book.
Mm,
So they were
mm,
trying to say, like, so if you do this, you're going to be judged, but if you do the opposite, you're going to be judged. And like different people had different approaches and they were judged for what they decided. And then, so we're just telling you when you enter, be prepared. So how are you going to manage this to keep
mm,
yourself well and your emotional well-being? I think that was the message. So that's like that fine line again, like balancing the like beware of this and be aware of it and try to think about um it's no easy space, and a lot of them when they were leaders didn't have the level of social media that's currently in place. So I think I heard Jacinda Ardern talking about how the Christchurch massacre was live streamed. So that, like, we're talking a completely different context than media being somewhat like in press rooms before,
mm,
um,
mm,
or people like following you. Now anyone has a camera and AI, like even right now, is creating stories that you can't actually have any control over that aren't real words that you're saying. So I don't know. It's just really, it's such a difficult time right now. Rania, go ahead.
My comment was related to the context and how they were exploring the culture and the environment where they were living and to what extent they were supported. For example, the Norway, when they discussed the grandparents and the grandchildren relationship and how the communities would support and the neighborhood and all these kind of things, while in another context, you wouldn't find such a um, level of traditions or cultures that would enable you to do or to have this supportive environment. So I think, going back to the communities and the traditions and the context, not to avoid generalizing and also to make sure that we really have a good sense of evaluation to our own resources and what kind of things would work in this place and might not be effective, if that would be the word. Especially that most of those ladies had worked in different countries and with different organizations, and they kind of, as you mentioned before, they knew each other. But when they went back to their own communities, that the knowledge would differ and the way of practice would also influence their practices and their implications, right?
Definitely. And
yeah.
I guess I wanted to talk because we are all interested in mentoring and supporting. Um, I was struck by their comments around the difference between mentoring and sponsoring, and that we need mentors. So mentors are really important to have, and also people who can give the advice and wisdom and support you. But sponsors are the people that are willing to put like money, their job recommendations, who actually go out of their way to put their reputation on the line for you. And that's actually the space that we need even more for to move the needle a little bit. And I guess that's what they kept saying. How is it that we're still in this position where we've been talking about representation in major like political spaces and it's still not happening, and that if you were to disappear for years and come back and guess that most countries were being run by a heterosexual white man, you wouldn't be not okay. So let's part some parts of the country. So that is a reliable component that they keep talking about. That's kind of an expectation in North America, for example. Thoughts about sponsorship, mentorship?
I think the problem of time is the thing, right? They actually talked about that as well. Asking somebody to be your mentor, like have you sought out mentors yourself and asked them to mentor you? And when you do that, do you feel like you're taking some of their time away, or is it them who tap on the shoulder and offer you their support? And I think sponsorship's more of a formalized process. That's the way I understood it, right?
Well, formalized, but also willing to put their reputation. Like
Petition on the
they are
line.
putting you forward or they're backing you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because a recent study that I'm working on about knowledge production in education leadership, one of the questions, did you have a mentor in your life? And most of the interviewees so far had been informing me that they had indirect mentors, like they would be engaged with them, but there's no kind of formal mentorship process that you are aware you're my mentor and I'm expecting 1, 2, 3 from you, or you're expecting 1, 2, 3 from me. On the other side, it was kind of fascinating to see one of them was referring to a negative impact of a mentor who was continuously telling the mentee or the faculty member that you are not able to publish studies, or this is a tough work, you should not go this way. But this interviewee tried their best not to follow the instructions or the guidelines of this mentor. So I would say, thank God they did not do this. But it's sometimes scary because you think it's an advice and you trust this person. But if you don't reflect yourself and try to challenge what's happening and try to be engaged in a different aspects, sometimes this mentorship process might be devastating or having a truly negative aspect if we don't continuously reflect within the mentorship process or the people around us and see what those pieces of advice would work with us really, or we should try something else or work it differently.
In this recent work that we've done, I did with two colleagues, and we're writing it up right now around emotional labor, and women in leadership positions in a province in Canada. So we did focus group discussions with women leaders, so either vice principals or principals in schools. And it was really fascinating because we were asking them about gender and leadership, and all focus groups talked about how they had never really thought about gender in leadership. And that was fascinating until we asked the direct question. And then they started talking and thinking about some of their experiences. And they had different reasons for that. So sometimes they were in an all-female team, or they'd been working alongside a female principal as a vice principal, or perhaps they just didn't know if it was like just a personality thing or if it was a gender thing that was at issue. But as they started to talk together, they started seeing lots of connections and thinking about the connection between gender and leadership in their own context. But I found it so interesting. Like, how often do we think about it when you're in the work? And if we don't talk about it in any of these courses, or it doesn't come up in your training, and then there's no like specific support, like there's no course for women principals that's like your friends, Andrea, right? The pathways to leadership for women. Like there's no, it's the same for everybody, and you may or may not have gender discussed in that space. So it's interesting. And Rania, we when we wrote that book, like that's the same. We were asking questions around the connection between gender and leadership, and I think many hadn't really thought too much about it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the effort of Women Ed when they suggested to have a master degree of women education leadership, that's something on this path that we might be exploring or worth to be studied to see the impact, and does it really differ from the other general education leadership or master programs about preparing, kind of education leaders or women leaders. And within the chapter that when they're saying there's a place in hell for women not supporting women, I found like, what kind of places would that be? Like what kind of, why and how would you convince others that the need of support? But at the same time, they had highlighted the importance of man what did they call it? I think man up. It's time to man up. Like
Yeah.
it's really needed.
Man up.
And we have seen this many times when you might be hesitant in discussing a specific idea, but when it's addressed by a man or a male colleague, that they will consider it or they will take it further. So this kind of community and raising those challenges for everyone to be aware of them. And as we were discussing and mentioning about either with my sons, my son-in-law, my husband, with everyone, these things need to be highlighted. And as you mentioned, Andrea, the support that men, spouse, or the family would give and provide for female communities, that cannot be. I would think it can't be measured, because it's just building everything together. It's like helping her to identify the identity, to like every single step that she's going to take within her life would be considered and shaped by this level of support. And to what extent, I know there's lots of effort that she will be doing to herself, but that also in the lens or the level of support that she had it from everyone, especially from parents, if we can consider that.
They talk about the women only conferences, sort of, and some of the limits of those, right? Like if it's only women in the room, like who's missing in the room and who needs to be part of the conversation. And I remember doing a session. It was a women in leadership conference, open to everyone, but only two men were in the room of 100 people. And that was interesting. So just thinking about like who's choosing to attend this? Oh, is it just for women? So I'm not going to go, except, just to show on page 289 the conversation, they said driving change requires decision makers to be involved and act. At the moment, those with the power to decide are still disproportionately men. That is why the male political party leader or business chief executive officer or chair of the board needs to be in the room, truly listening to women, responding to women, and acting for gender equality. Making this meaningful, not just as an exercise in showing up, requires men to think about their role, but women also need to plan how we can best bring men in. So it can't be a conversation without men.
Yeah.
So it's how do we bring across both of these different areas of interest?
You remember,
Andrea.
Trista, when we had the book and Prof. Khalid Arar, when he said that, I know, ladies, you are more than able to write this book alone, but a man's voice and support will be needed within such a project. Sometimes, like you will be thinking and reflecting on this aspect, like why we don't write a book about women by women. But when you have this kind of comprehensive and ecological kind of support, that will make a lot. Sorry, Andrea.
Yes, true.
Oh,
True.
no. I used to work at a school, and we had this Renaissance Women Leaders Network. So we invited Julia, and that's when I heard her speak. But we also had bank CEOs. We have people from all different walks of life, but women who shared their stories. Jennifer Abrams came and did it for us. All different people, but some of the men would ring up and say, "Can I come?" They'd phone and say, "Can I come?" And I checked, and the principal goes, "Well, yes, we welcome them, because that they get to hear the other part." The only part I would say is there's a part where women feel that psychological safety with other women to have very discussions that are really raw sometimes. So we created this cone of silence within there. Whatever was spoken about in there stayed within there. So we did create that safe space for some of the women. Sometimes we had 300 people, sometimes we had 80 people. It depended on who was speaking and what the workshop was like. But my goal one day, I always wanted to do this, was do a conference, but all the speakers and presenters are women, but all the audience is mixed. Just to, you always go and you always see a lot of male presenters, and then you might be lucky to see more women, but it's slowly getting better. But that was one of my ideas probably 8 years ago, thinking, can we create a conference by women for everyone? So something different.
Let's do it.
And that course that I told you about, that's in Australia for Women's Pathways to Politics, it actually came from Harvard. Somebody went over to Harvard and said, and Harvard does have courses for women, but the one they had was going from Harvard Square to the White House. I think it was something like that. And they came to Australia and worked to create this, because they said, education is one of the things. And also that networking. I think the
Mhm.
networking, which they discussed as well, really important. It's not about, it's just about having time with other people and building relationships to get, to have those conversations.
Well, I'm looking at the time, and I know that we generally start to wrap up around now. So I'm sure we could keep talking so much about this book. It was, I think it was a great read. I really think it was helpful. I loved reading people's reflections on their experience, the good and the not so good, and also really, people who are trailblazers in that way of trying new things and putting themselves out there, and the impact that that has had on our communities. I think seeing more women in political roles helps also us see more women in different spaces. And I do hope that there's that for my daughters and my son, they feel that, it's an open space for people who are interested in how do we help support them to get there. Um, do we have a slide about our next book, I believe. Should we share that or we just announce it? You know, continue on
Yeah,
this path a little.
just before we announce, I think the standout lessons and the 10 lessons that they had highlighted at the end of the book, with no one way of leading, that's something we all need to reflect on and see that there is no right and wrong. And it all comes with of reflecting and learning more and more, like leadership for learning. That's something of how we can develop and improve our practices. But there is no magic touch, and there is no one recipe that would fit all.
Too bad. It would be really helpful if there was a magic recipe. That would be really helpful. Well, let's see what we can uncover in our next book. So again, lessons on leadership from two women who went first. So thinking about what this actually means, and I'm looking forward to seeing what lessons we can pull in, and I think that it'll be a conversation that continues from this current book we've just finished. And I know I'll return back to some of the lessons that we've experienced from women leadership. So thank you to the authors for putting this together and helping a little closer to some of these women who have been in political leadership positions and lessons they've shared, stories. And thanks to my friends for joining us today. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Trista. Thank you, Andrea.